In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens. First National Bank, first, always.
Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbeville. Lieutenant General John H. Miller and his wife Virginia have lived in their College Station home for 10 years. And before you say that's not all that long, well, consider this. When they moved here, by his count, it was their 37th move of their married life. Such is the life of this career Marine who served his country in 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He calls his service not all that distinguished, but it was indeed distinguished enough to earn 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Star Medals, 2 Legions of Merits, and the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. And that's just to name a few. It is my honor to welcome General John H. Miller to Veterans of the Valley. General Miller, it is indeed an honor to have you here. You call your service not all that distinguished because you say you're not a hero of these wars. You say who the heroes were. I want you to talk about that.
Well, the heroes are the guys that are not with us
Right.
now. But I don't consider myself a hero. I've never jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. I've never jumped out of one that was damaged. I didn't have a ship that went down from under me. I have led a reasonably charmed life through my military career.
Right, right. 40 years, though, you were in the Marines, so you were a career guy all the way.
Yes, I have a long career.
Right. And I would say that it is distinguished. Let's go back. You were born in San Angelo. You went to high school in Axtell, Texas, and you went to A&M in 1942, but you just stayed about a year or so and enlisted in the Marines. Sort of talk about the start of your military service.
Well, I came to A&M, as you say, in June of 1942. Young 17-year-old, just off the farm.
Right.
And got my first taste of a little bit of military in the Corps, plus all the harassment that went along with that.
Right.
And I learned a little, but I was, like a lot of the youth at that time, I was eager to get into the fray. The war was going on, and the whole country was behind the war. You know, all of the things that we've always go back and think about, the rationing, everybody from 18 to 36 years old was either drafted or volunteered. And I thought that the best place to go was the Marines. I saw some Marines that were going to radio school here at A&M at that time, and they looked very sharp. And I said, that's the outfit I want to get in. So when it came up time to register for the draft, I volunteered to go in the Marine Corps.
Talk about your World War II service. You served stateside, also in Okinawa, and eventually in Japan as part of occupational service.
Well, I went to boot camp, which was a piece of cake, having gone through almost a year and a half of training here. I knew the rifle, I knew a little bit about drill and all this sort of stuff. And I really wanted to get into an infantry or tank or something like that outfit, but I got assigned to radar school, and I didn't even know what radar was at that time. But I went on and went through almost about 9 months of radar school training to become a radar technician operator, radio technician operator, and so forth, and then was assigned to the Marine Aviation, in which when I did go overseas, I was with a Marine Air Group.
Right.
Marine Air Group 31, initially in the Marshall Islands, and then they made the landing in the operation in Okinawa. When that took place in, I guess, 1945.
Right.
It was on the 1st of April, 1945, that they landed, as I recall. And then That was not. That's why I say there's nothing distinguished about this. All I was doing. We had a few long-range artillery. We had a couple of raids by the Japanese. We had a couple of commando raids on the airfield, but nothing sensational. I wasn't any great danger.
Right.
So, and then I went to up to Japan for the occupation. Stayed there for about 6 months. Came home and was discharged.
Right.
And then I was ready to. By the fall, I was ready to come back to A&M. So I came back, changed my major from an agricultural major to electrical engineering. Got a degree in 1949. In the meantime, had gone to officer candidate school at Quantico, kind of as a hedge. If I get called back again, I'm going to go back as an officer. Although I'd made staff sergeant in this time and during World War II, which was kind of unique in that promotions didn't come that fast.
Right.
So then also then upon graduation, looking at job opportunities, the offers that I got for a junior engineer, they were $230 or $40, $50 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, the Marine Corps pay that much. So I talked it over with my wife, and we decided to give the Marine Corps a try. I said, heck, I can go in the Marine Corps and I can retire before I'm 40 years old.
Right.
I can have another career.
Your wife, Virginia, you all had gotten married, I guess, in 1947.
We got married in 1947.
Right. When you were in school.
When I was in school here.
This was a girl that you'd gone to the first grade
Yeah,
with, right?
We originally met in the first grade at Axtell School,
Uh-huh.
a small rural consolidated school. I guess there were about 20 in our first grade class.
Right.
But we separated somewhere along the line and didn't get back together until after World War II.
Right. You decided to stay in the Marines, and that's when you started your officer service,
Yeah.
because you got your second lieutenant commission when you graduated from
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M. And then Korean War broke out, and this is what you call pretty much your big war.
Yeah.
Talk about your service in the Korean War, and specifically about being part of the first wave to land ashore at Incheon.
Well, the Korean War started about 2 weeks after I graduated from basic school.
Right.
And we were ordered directly without delay to go to Camp Pendleton to form up the what amounted to the 1st Marine Regiment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say we pulled people together, had a very short time for training. We trained on a ship on the way to Japan. We got to Japan, reloaded, and made the Incheon Landing. By that time, we were a pretty good, I thought, pretty good group. I was the machine gun platoon commander at this time. Rifle company had 3 rifle platoons, a machine gun platoon, and a mortar section. And so we landed at Incheon. As I mentioned, the Incheon Landing wasn't all that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like Evo or
Right.
Tarawa or something like that. The issue there was timing, getting over the mud flats at high tide, which we did. And I guess I got my first taste of bullets flying by, but no real big thing. And in a period of about I've forgotten, but in less than 2 weeks, we had moved all the way on through Kimpo Airfield and into and taken Sewell.
Right.
And we came up on a significant opposition, but most of it was North Vietnamese, and they weren't as tough an opposition as it later turned out that the Chinese were.
Right. It was, though, in Korea that you did earn 3 Purple Hearts that
Yeah.
were awarded as a Purple Heart with 2 stars. Talk about what you can and what you want to about what happened to where you had these, you got these 3
Well,
Purple
I got the
Hearts.
first one in Sewell. We were going through the city, and I think it's where the Sewell University is now.
Right.
It was on a hill, and a grenade landed at my feet, and a piece of the fragment hit me on one cheek and cut a little hole there and so forth. But it wasn't anything significant, didn't require anything other than a bandage and go on. So that was a very, very minor one. We, as I say, after the Sewell operation, we were pulled out and went around to Wonsan, and eventually wound up at the Chosin Reservoir. Again, I was fortunate. I was in the 1st Marine Regiment. I had one battalion at the sort of the base of the reservoir, the southern end of the reservoir, and that was the battalion I was with. We had another battalion about 10 miles down the road, a place called Coterie, which was where the regimental headquarters was, and then we had another one at the foot of the pass, which guarded the main supply route. We were the furthest north of that regiment, but the guys that had the tough time were the 5th and the 7th Marines that were up on the western side of the reservoir, a place called Udamni, and were being urged to attack to the west to link up with the 8th Army over on that had come up through Pyongyang. Of course, the Chinese hit at that time and disrupted everything. It cut all the supply lines, both between units and behind units and everything else. So we were isolated. We were isolated in about 4 different groups.
Right.
So it was a matter of turning around and fighting our way back out to the sea so we could get aboard ship and get out. As I say, I was never concerned. Maybe I didn't see the big picture, but we were never concerned because we had some good units, knew what they were doing. We had the control of the skies, and right there at Hagaru, the engineers came in and in the dirt, frozen dirt, they built a little airstrip about 4,000 feet long, and we flew out thousands of casualties, as well as bringing in replacements.
Right.
So I did get my 2nd Purple Heart there. I was working with the battalion executive officer and with a ragtag group of people to secure a hill that sort of dominated the eastern part of the perimeter, and got shot through the shoulder, and so I got a 2nd Purple Heart there.
Right. Your 3rd Purple Heart, you were wounded by some mortar fire, and this.
That was later on after we'd gone back down to Pusan, Mason, reorganized, and going back up through the central part, what I think the history calls the Great Guerrilla Hunt, and we were looking for stray in North Vietnamese, and then of course moved on up. And of course by this time, then the Chinese were coming on down and had recaptured Seoul and were coming down through the central part of Korea. So we again engaged the Chinese, and then I got hit by a mortar round that went through one arm, hit me in the side of the head, took me out of the war.
Yeah. Damaged face, and
lost
permanent vision damage.
Broke all the bones around the eye socket, and then took the central vision out of that eye.
So Korea was done for you then, and you went and did some recuperation, I believe, in Corpus Christi, and this was just the start of sort of one movement after another.
I just, I got back through the hospital system, back to Corpus, to the hospital there. I was mobile, so and all I had was, and I also broke my arm. I had a arm and a slant, what do you call it? Anyhow, I went over to the Marine barracks there and said, "Hey, can you give me a job?" And they gave me the permanent officer of the day. So I took care of the guard duties during the day and stood a routine, whatever came up during the night.
Right.
I was in the pecking order there for the night duty. Right. Then we got into, I went to McAllister, Oklahoma, went to China Lake, California. I got into the guided missile program. First guided missiles that the Marine Corps came up with. It was a surface-to-air missile called a Terrier. We called it. We later had 2 battalions, Marine medium anti-aircraft missile battalions.
Right.
And we had 2 battalions of 29 Palms at one time. I then went from this unit, which was a test unit, on up to postgraduate school in Monterey.
Right, right.
Oh.
Your travels, matter of fact, you told me in your 40-year career you never spent more than 3 years in any one place.
Well,
during your
Monterey was one of the longest times. I was there 3 years.
You were there 3 years.
Roughly 3 years,
that
maybe a little less.
And going where General Miller was stationed, he talked about China Lake, California, Monterey, Washington, D.C. What, 4 different times, I guess, you were in Washington, D.C. right before your career was over. Camp Pendleton, back to Okinawa in September of '63, and this was really your first exposure to Vietnam when you went there in '63, right?
Yes.
Right.
I went there in '63 with an infantry battalion. I was the S3 operations officer, and we operated out around Okinawa. We didn't get engaged with anybody because there wasn't any enemy at that time. We were in training, and we were, of course, in readiness there. We went to Japan for training at Camp Fuji. We went to the Philippines. We were embarked aboard ships of the 7th Fleet as a special landing force, and we made all the Liberty ports, Hong Kong and places like that.
Right.
And then we came back, and that's somewhere along there was when the Gulf of Tonkin started, and they mounted out a brigade of which we were a part, and we went down and steamed around off the coast of Da Nang for seemed like a month or so. And that was the first time that I had an opportunity to go into Da Nang, because we did have some Marine helicopter units there at the time, so we were able to go in and liaison with them and see what the land looked like. But in the meantime, our battalion was ready to come home. We'd finished our 13-month tour. So they sent us back to Okinawa and sent us on back to the States. And I then went to Fleet Marine Force Pacific as a staff officer, and made numerous trips to Vietnam over my, almost 3 years there.
That's right. You were based in Hawaii then, right?
We were based in Hawaii, but I was kind of instrumental in developing the logistics support for the total force in Vietnam. So
I want to talk more about that later, but I want to go ahead and go to some pictures right now, some photographs that they're hanging in your garage wall, as a matter of fact, that you loaned us, and I want to go to some of them and let you talk a little bit about some of the pictures. First of all, what are we looking at here? You're on the right in that picture. Talk about that.
That's me on the right, and my 2 good buddies from the battalion in Korea, Bob Needham and Wayne Hall. Bob's in the middle and Wayne Hall's on the right. We were all platoon leaders. We were all in the same basic class. We all went out and joined the same company together, and we stuck together, and we're still good buddies to this day. Bob Needham lives in Pensacola, and Wayne Hall lives in New Hampshire.
Great picture. Okay, let's move on. This is a photograph taken of you at a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Well, one of my jobs as Lieutenant General was to be the Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans, Policies, and Operations at Headquarters Marine Corps, which is also known as the OPDEP of the Marine Corps. So the OPDEPs always met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Sometimes they dismissed us when they had something real secret they wanted to talk about. But normally we met as we did here, and you see me at the end of the table there, along with the Commandant of the Marine Corps at that time, General Robert H. Barrow, and going on around is the Air Force OPDEP and the Air Force Chief of Staff, and then the gentleman to the right there is the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Right. That whole table is surrounded by people.
And the whole table on the other side of the Air Force and the Navy.
Okay, let's move on to next photograph.
That's me getting promoted to Lieutenant General at Quantico. I'd gone down there as a Major General, and then eventually got promoted to General. My wife on the right, and again, General Bob Barrow, a great friend of mine and a great mentor of mine, is that time the Commandant came down to do the promotion.
1979, I believe. That's your wife.
Right.
Okay. Let's move on.
That's a good picture. That's reviewing a cadet corps at A&M. General Arm Simpson there, between the 2 Marines. Once I made Brigadier General, he called me up and he says, I want to get you down to review the cadet corps. So he did a couple of times. And This was, I think, the first time I came down. I believe that I was Brigadier General at that time. Jack Ivins is the Marine Colonel on the right there. Then General Simpson, then the Corps Commander, the Cadet Corps Commander is on my right there.
Okay.
I think that was the Clemson game in about
80 something.
70 something. I'm not sure.
Right. Here's another time that you're a little bit later with there's Dr. Frank Vandenberg. Of course, you're on the left.
Yeah, that's me and the president of the university, and again Arm Simpson, and the Marine NROTC commander, and we're laughing because the cleanup crew from the Parsons Cavalry had just passed through the reviewing stand and presented arms.
I see. They had saluted you while they were pushing their wheelbarrows. Okay.
That's a picture of me in either Denmark or Norway. I've forgotten. We ran exercises over there when I was FMF Lant every winter in order to get cold weather training. We had one of the jobs of the Marines was to be ready to respond to any kind of a Warsaw Pact move into the Norway or Denmark area, and that's me with walking around looking at some of the troops as they we were in place there.
Okay. Move on. I think we've got there's a final picture. I believe that's your
was
official
my
photograph.
official
right?
photograph from headquarters Marine Corps, taken somewhere back about 1970 something.
All right. Good-looking soldier. Want to move on. Your service in Vietnam. Talk a little bit about more when you went back to Vietnam and what was involved there.
Well, as I say, I went back to Vietnam. I mentioned earlier that I had just come from an overseas 13-month tour right at the headquarters FMF PAC and spent several years there. It wasn't time to go back. I think I would have liked to go back and had a year's tour there and had a chance to get an infantry battalion and so forth. But the commandant had decreed that no one would go back into Vietnam until his time, his dwell time, so to speak, I guess is a new term, had been accomplished. So I went to the 2nd Marine Division from FMF Lant, which was at Camp Lejeune, and Arm Simpson was the division commander, and he let me have a battalion. So I had a battalion for a year, and we deployed to the Caribbean and had a lot of exercises there as well as in North Carolina. And then I went to the Army War College, and now it's my time
in Pennsylvania,
to go.
right?
That's right, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Now it's my time to go back to Western Pacific and to Vietnam, and I did. But I knew that I wasn't going to get an infantry battalion, certainly not right away. So I asked if I couldn't go to this Force Logistic Command, which I had been primarily instrumental in creating as an action officer, staff officer, while I was at FMF PAC. So that's where I went, and I became the H&S Battalion Commander there, which was a grandiose job. I had probably about 3,000 or so troops, but most of them were working for somebody else, so they were just mine for administration and care and cleaning. But I'd also had the security for a substantially large area around the installation there, as well as out into the villages.
Right.
So it was John, but I didn't get to finish that tour. I got ordered up to Okinawa to be the Chief of Staff of Marine Corps Base Camp Butler.
Right.
Serving for this General Barrow that I just showed you. He had just made Brigadier General, and he requested that I come up to be his Chief of Staff, and so being a good Marine, I went. I didn't particularly, I really wanted to finish my tour in Vietnam. I liked a few months of that, but I went up there, and as it worked out, I went from an unaccompanied tour to an accompanied tour, meaning I could bring my family out, which consisted by this time only of my wife and young daughter.
General Miller, we're really running short on time. Unfortunately, we've got just a couple of minutes. I know that in your last command, you were a commanding general, Marine Amphibious Force in Norfolk, Virginia, and it was during this time in the early '80s that the terrorist attack in Beirut that killed 220 Marines.
241, as a matter of fact.
241 total.
And probably some have died of wounds after that. The greatest disappointment of my whole career, or certainly that we lost those Marines.
Right.
And as I mentioned, I was there just a couple of weeks before this happened. I didn't see anything wrong with the security setup and the manner in which they were deployed. We had it wasn't to our liking. We wouldn't have done this, but this was what we were told, where we were told to set up. We would have gotten a tactical high ground if it had been, but we were told to secure the airfield. It wasn't a tactical sort of thing that you would do, but that had nothing to do with the terrorist attack.
Right.
And the terrorist attack was just it's a prelude to what's been going on since then.
Exactly.
And we learned some lessons, and we learned some very tough lessons from that.
40 years. If you had it to do all over again, would you?
I'm glad you asked that question. The answer is yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would do a lot of the thing. I'd join the Marine Corps again.
Right.
I would marry the same girl I married. But if you ask somebody a question, would you do all these things like you did before? Like you did? The answer is no. And anybody that is thinking would have to say no. That means that you didn't learn anything from your experience. Right. And you learned from experience. It's interesting that in the military, you only get to do the job you're doing one time.
Yes, sir.
Then you are generally elevated, and you're going up the ladder, or and so you got to learn from experience. You got to learn from the experience that you get. You got to learn from the troops that you're leading. You got to learn from your seniors. So that when you're a company commander, you can look up and say, "Hey, when I'm a battalion commander, I'm going to do it this way." So there's a lot of things, and you look back on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I wish we could keep going, but we're out of time. Thank you for your distinguished service.
Thank you,
General John Miller, and we do thank General John Miller for his distinguished service, and we thank him and salute him as we salute all veterans. Please join us next time. I'm Tom Turbeville. This is Veterans of the Valley.
In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens. First National Bank, first, always.
All right, I'm ready whenever you all are. Going for 30 seconds?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, Tom. 30.
Are we rolling?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Go here in 5 seconds. 4. Lieutenant General John H. Miller served 40 years in the United States Marines and served his country in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He was awarded 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Star Medals, and even the Distinguished Service Medal from the Navy. I'm Tom Turbeville, inviting you to meet one of the Brazos Valley's most distinguished veterans, General John H. Miller, on Veterans of the Valley, Friday at 8:30, Saturday and Sunday at 6:30, right here on KAMU TV. All right, we going?
Whenever you're ready.
Lieutenant General John H. Miller served 40 years in the United States Marines and served his country in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He was awarded 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Star Medals, and even the Distinguished Service Medal from the Navy. I'm Tom Turbeville, inviting you to meet one of the Brazos Valley's most distinguished veterans, General John H. Miller, on Veterans of the Valley, Friday at 8:30, Saturday and Sunday at 6:30, right here on KAMU TV. Flub-a-dub for the Christmas party, yeah. That was good. Thank you very much. That was